States come up with treaties, passing laws, but they also try to change discourse. Governments also take action when there's intense domestic and international criticism. So it's important to ensure that these actions that the government takes are not strategic, not towards these critics, but actual comprehensive efforts to change the outcome of the human rights situation of the country. We saw several examples of this in relation to the recent DSA news, where several people have expressed satisfaction at the repeal of the act without fully understanding what has transpired. So I think it's important that ambassadors, foreign officials focusing on Bangladesh should consult their country experts and wait to see what the cybersecurity bill entails before expressing dissatisfaction. The international community has a responsibility to analyze and monitor and comment on human rights issues, not just react to these brief updates. The other broad issue is, like Meenakshi said, all of this is happening at the verge of an election. The Rohingya issues, the lack of funding. There's a huge responsibility for the international community, as well as there's a responsibility for the Bangladesh government not to violate Rohingya rights of the Rohingya refugees. But all of this happening at the verge of elections, it's very important to note that human rights are protected leading up to the election, during the election, and after the election. I'm really looking forward to how the discussion unfolds. Thank you.
Great, Yasmin, thank you very much. And welcome to those who have joined us. I guess it's a good sign in an event like this where the number of participants or the number of attendees keeps increasing. I'd also note that we have a good viewership right now on Facebook Live who's following this discussion, and there's a lively discussion in the chat on Facebook as well. So thank you to all who've joined. For those of you who missed the opening remarks or the beginning of the program, a video recording of this will be posted afterwards on YouTube and on our Facebook page, so you can go back and review that. Finally, we have a number of good questions that have come in, but keep the questions coming. There'll be some new areas and then also some opportunities to expand on what our presenters have said. So to close off our opening remarks, I now invite Sanjita Islam from Meyer Doc to provide some opening comments, and then we'll get into a question and answer period. So Sanjita, over to you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Right to Freedom, for letting me be a part of this session. I'm representing MyDAC, which is an organization of families, each of whom has a relative that was picked up by the Bangladesh law enforcement authorities, sometimes over the last 14 years, and is subject to continuing enforced disappearances. MyDAC, which means Mother's Call, started working in 2014 to advocate for the enforced disappearances in Bangladesh and the release of those currently secretly detained outside the criminal justice system by government authorities. My brother was abducted, Shahidul Islam Shumon. He was the General Secretary of 25 number ward here in Dhaka on 4th of December 2013, which was just before the election of 2014. Who were targeted before the election on these abductions and disappearances and killings they are mainly the grassroots level people who have mobilizing capacity and also have that ability to maintain relation door to door. So Awami League and the government targeted those people's leaders. They may not be the prominent, famous national leaders, but in their own community, they are very well connected, strong organizers. And by doing all such things, government wanted to create a panic and fear psychosis in the society as a whole across Bangladesh. And this situation is complemented and collaborated by the law enforcement agencies and the justice institutions of this country. And we have visited, submitted applications, met all the parties related with this law enforcement agencies in Bangladesh, including the government officials, and appealed multiple times to know about our missing family members and urged to do a transparent investigation and take necessary action to find our family members. But always their silence and continuous ignorance, and such responses justify their all ill motives. Beside all FIR cases and all habeas corpus petitions before the High Court, I think not a single family, victim family, have received any assertive remedy from the High Court. Right now, there are almost 3.9 million cases against all opposition activists, all defenders, general people, journalists, who are raising their voices, who are trying to express their freedom of expression. Pursuant to the sanction on RAB and others by the US government, the numbers of extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearances have been reduced dramatically. And this circumstantial evidence demonstrates that the allegations of systematic killings and disappearances brought by the victim families and others against the law enforcement agencies merit consideration. In addition to the above, it is now well perceived in home and abroad that this government, having political motives involved in serious human rights abuses. It is to note that the institutions like police, judiciary, other law enforcement agencies, election commission, civil administration, constitutional and statutory bodies, and so on hearing, Bangladesh have become dysfunctional and or subservient to the vicious cycle of the authoritarian regime. The political goons, having direct support from police, even dared to attack general people on the road, opposition activists, even to the ambassadors who were while visiting the victim families. Taking into the gravity of the situation, the visit of UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in her last report in 2022 had offered the government to extend UN cooperation to conduct credible investigations of the cases of major human rights violations. But this government has not even responded to that call. Given the said premises, we strongly believe that no credible investigation on those issues can be possible under the domestic investigation mechanism. And besides the UN working group, Human Rights Watch also identified, and they have published a report about the 86 men to know their whereabouts who were picked up by the law enforcement agencies. And till now, those also from the government, we have not received any of the responses. And this number of enforced disappearances and then extrajudicial killing is really high. If we say till now, the documented cases of enforced disappearances are over 650, and extrajudicial killing is more than 2,600. You can have this all data on the Asian Human Rights Commission and also the Bangladesh Capital Punishment Justice System's website. Right. These enforced disappearances to us are done by the law enforcement agencies in order to eliminate mainly the political opponent. By doing this, the election system has collapsed as a whole from 2014 onwards, and it is deteriorating. Right to vote is snatched, massively increased the abduction, arrest, and they are maintaining a different mechanism now, keeping them for 3 to 5 days and showing them arrest for any of the terror cases. Crime against humanity only for retaining illegitimate power. Corruption has become fundamental due to the absence of democracy. This authoritarian attitude of the government and her trusted team members, especially the commanding officers of the law enforcement agencies. If we say in terms of freedom of expression, social media like Facebook is also now collaborating with government by recruiting local staff to silence the critics and to block the critical content and also dispose all the corruptions done by them. Our mainstream media, over 95% are owned by managed by the ruling party people. They face forced sponsorship and self-sponsorship. In that content, social media could have been a platform to the general people, but this is now also collaborating with the government. We have seen in several occasions, several protests in Dhaka and across Bangladesh, mobile network was also down on the whole area, so that general people, activists could not communicate with each other. And we have seen the broadcasters who were also beaten, picked up and tortured and stopped by the law enforcement agencies and all the Awami League people. And all these aforesaid situations have been monitored by the different international organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, UN Working Group, USA, UK, EU, European Union, and then so on. As MIADAC from this platform, we always requested and raised our voices to have a proper investigation, to have our brothers back, actually, to have them back and to get them back from the secret detention cells to the families. We want them alive. And beside that, now in this scenario, because we have started working from 2014 onwards, and now it is more than 10 years, we request from our side to everyone that mainly the international community should also raise their voice to make the justice delivery system effective, to pursue the restoration of democracy, rule of law, and human rights in Bangladesh. I thank you, everyone, and I'll go for the question session. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sanjita. I have to say that we've made history here today, because in over 30 years of being a diplomat and being involved in international affairs, this is the first event I've ever been to where the panelists kept to the assigned time for their opening remarks. So thank you and congratulations to our panelists. We have some really good questions that have come in from our attendees, which I'll be going through in a moment. But first I wanted to check with Ambassador Milam to see if, Bill, do you have a question for any of the panelists?
Actually, I have quite a few, but I think I will pass because I think they're, for the most part, their discussions were very interesting and extremely, and I think we ought to get to the questions that will delve into each panelist discussion rather than something general I was going to ask. So we could, we'll come back at the end maybe, and if there's a room, I might ask some questions.
Great, Bill, thanks. We'll have about 30 minutes for questions. So what I'll do is I will go through the questions that have been asked. There are some that are duplicative, so I'll try to merge those. But I'll also take my prerogative as a moderator and start with a question, which I'll leave to the four of you. And this is a question that those of us with Right to Freedom, and I assume the other organizations, get all the time from those who are, say, more or less critical of the regime. They'll say that there have been human rights violations committed by other governments in Bangladesh's history, military governments, democratic governments, caretaker governments. So they'll ask, why are we paying so much attention or so much focus to what's happening now and to the human rights issues under the Awami League government? So how would any of you like to respond to this question, which I'm sure you'll also get from time to time?
You want me to go first?
Sure, Meenakshi. Yes, sure.
Well, it is not just previous governments of Bangladesh that are accused of having had poor human rights records. Quite often, we are also told about other governments. For instance, why is the US talking about human rights in Bangladesh and why they're not considering human rights situation in their own countries and so on and so forth. And it is all true. And as much as we would like Bangladesh to stop its human rights abuses, and extremely egregious ones at that, and ensure accountability and end impunity, issues that my colleagues have just spoken of, we would also like Bangladesh to take a stand on human rights violations elsewhere. That is what the universal, human rights world order wanted to promote. It was a standard like that. So trying to point to someone else's faults is not going to solve the situation that you are responsible for right now, which is what you owe to your own people. And right now, the government of Bangladesh owes to the people of Bangladesh a secure environment where they're not forever wondering whether tomorrow they're going to be crossfired or disappeared or tortured or have their loved ones disappear, or that, a Facebook post could drag them into jail. That is not a very rights-respecting government. And those standards should be upheld at home as much as Bangladesh presents, demands that those standards of other people. You're muted.
Muted.
Sorry, I was just wondering, do any of our other presenters want to comment on that, or would you prefer that we move on to the other questions?
Yeah, I can comment, because that's something that we get a lot as well. But Meenakshi put it very very accurately, that there are rights violations happening right now, and why not talk about that? And this is the whataboutism that we get, right? Or what about this? What about that? What about? So it's, the thing is, what about the rights violations that are happening right now? And why we focus on the government is that right now, at this moment, it's the responsibility of the government. Whatever the political party is, whoever's governing has the responsibility to protect human rights. That is what we're doing. We're calling on the government to do their job. Simple as that.
Great, thanks, Yasasni.
John, let me add to this and echo what Yasmin and Meenakshi has already said. In case of Bangladesh, the history of human rights violation is not new. There is no doubt about it. Previous governments, you mentioned political governments such as one led by BNP, or for that matter, caretaker government is also has been accused of, and quite rightfully so, that they have violated. We can recall those situation where even legal impunity has been provided through the parliament. Those needs to be mentioned. Nobody is trying to, or at least I am not trying to condone those things. In equal measures, we can say that human rights violations are taking place in the United States and elsewhere. And we should speak, and I do, and others do speak, such as the Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and other rights groups do speak about it. But that should not justify, by no means it justifies the violation of human rights. Because the loved ones who are lost, either because of extrajudicial killing, is your loved ones. The person who has disappeared is your loved ones, your family. And if we specifically talk about Bangladesh, Bangladesh was established, the commitment of Bangladesh establishment in 1971 was one of the three principles was human dignity. Had it been previously trampled by other governments, they need to be held accountable as much as the current one, and we speak, and you must speak of the current one because that is the reality on the ground today. Yesterday or tomorrow are the ones that is going to be affecting you as a citizen, and as a citizen, Bangladeshis as well as global citizen, those who speak of human rights, such as the Amnesty International, needs to speak out. That is how I see it.
Great, thank you, Ali. Sanjita, would you like to comment on this at all?
Yes, if you allow me. As a victim, and I know how I feel when I'm searching for my brother and my people like my brother who are secretly detained. We don't know what happened with them. We are standing for the justice from our side. Something happened wrong in previously that cannot be continued. No, or we should stop somewhere, and then we have to stand for the right things to do. And it is government's responsibility to ensure that we are securing those rights for the people. And they should find out where these people are, and they should clarify and respond to the people of the country. So I think we are standing for the justice and ensuring that people are living with their rights. Thank you.
Great, thanks to all the panelists for giving me some talking points that I can use going forward. I learned a lot with that answers those questions as well. A couple of our presenters talked briefly about the Rohingya refugees, and we have some questions as well to follow up on that. The first comes from Kimberly Stanton from the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. Kimberly writes that some people are hesitant to criticize Bangladesh's human rights record because there is appreciation for the state's decision to accept the Rohingya refugees. Recognizing that it's not the topic of this briefing, Can you say anything about the situation of the Rohingya? And how would you respond to the concern to not offend Bangladesh because they are hosting the Rohingya? And on a similar same topic, but a slightly different note, Tariq Choyan asks that, or notes that high-level government officials several times have said, we are hosting 1 million Rohingya refugees. Isn't that defending human rights? Don't teach us what human rights is. What's your observation in this regard? So again, I'll open the floor if somebody wants to talk about the Rohingya issue as a human rights issue and how to balance the international community's desire to see Bangladesh respond to the needs of Rohingya refugees while at the same time looking at broader human rights issues. And actually, we asked you to go first last time, so I'll give you some time to collect your thoughts, but would one of the other presenters like to talk on those two issues?
I can go first.
Please, yes.
So that's actually a very good point. Where do you strike the balance? Where do you commend the government? Yes, this is great. You're hosting 1 million Rohingya. That's a great thing that the government of Bangladesh is doing. But that does not counter the human rights violations that are being committed. Not just that, keeping Rohingya in the country itself is not enough. This is why I said there is a responsibility for the national government as well as to the international community for the protection of Rohingya. There has to be adequate funding. There has to be facilities supplied. There has to be support for the government to ensure that rights of the Rohingya are protected. But on the other hand, the government should stop with forced relocations to Bash and Shah. The government should actively find ways to educate the Rohingya children. There are about 500,000 children in the camps. So the responsibility lies on both, while you can also say like the government has a responsibility as well here. Where you strike the balance when reaching out to the government is something that is very interesting. Some I understand that some organizations seem to, some entities seem to overlook the rights violations by the government for the same reason. But where we stand, I think it's possible to acknowledge the good work and comment on where more work is needed and tell the government when human rights are being violated.
Great, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to talk about the issue of Rohingya and how that impacts the overall human rights situation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks so much. I think first of all, we have to acknowledge that to be a refugee is one of the most horrible things that can happen to anyone. You leave behind all that you know and love, because everything that is familiar, because you really are risking, you're trying to save your own lives. And it's often people try and conflate a refugee situation with one of irregular migration, which also is driven by a lot of desperation, but is often more economic, while the refugee situations are almost always much more immediate in terms of risk to life and limb. To that extent, I would say that in the work that we do, and this is, I suppose, because we can take a bit of a macro view because we work in so many different countries, that no government is presenting a very good sort of example on protection of refugee rights. In fact, I remember the time when the refugees first started arriving in 2017 and standing there and watching ordinary Bangladeshis bring food and clothes in by truckloads to help the refugees. Now, there is refugee fatigue. We understand that, but we also understand, and this is where I think there is a problem, because while it is true that the onus of trying to hold the Myanmar junta to account for the abuses that they visited upon the Rohingya, to create safe places, safe conditions for return, lies with the international community, the Bangladesh government has altered its own narrative. From a time when the Prime Minister came and said that she was willing to accommodate the refugees, we are now finding that to be called a Rohingya is almost like an abusive term. Like Bangladeshis will say to each other, oh, stop being a Rohingya. I mean, that it is that level of humiliation and insult that is visited upon a community as desperate as the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. So much more needs to be done. And Bangladesh's hope that they can, force these people to return when the conditions are not safe is misplaced, because it will pretty much in these conditions of desperation just force them back or force them onto boats where they will be bouncing around in the Bay of Bengal. And what is much more needed is for Bangladesh to invest long term to ensure that the refugees have access to education and livelihood, because then they can contribute to Bangladeshi society and not be treated as the burden that they are being treated as right now. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Meenakshi. If there's no other comments, I'll move on to the next question. And again, we've gotten a number of questions. I hope we'll get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can. And again, we'll try to condense some of them because a number of the questions touch on similar areas. We have a question now from a good friend, Owen Lippert from Opposition International, former National Democratic Institute chief of party in Bangladesh, a person who knows Bangladesh very well. Owen asks or notes that political accountability of the police is a difficult issue in every jurisdiction. Why is the issue of police conduct not an issue raised in the National Assembly? Could an all-party legislative committee be a political initiative if the scope covered past as well as current government performance? Ali, I don't know if you want to take this on and talk about the role of Parliament.
Yeah, I would love to respond to it, particularly the question comes from Owen, who knows so well about Bangladesh and keeps up with Bangladesh situation almost on an everyday basis. And this is an opportunity to interact with him. That's right. Why the police issue is not being discussed or being, held accountable in the National Assembly. The response, the most blatant or blunt response would be because this is a one-party parliament. There's no way this parliament can actually hold anyone accountable. Does it? Did it hold anybody accountable? Did it hold those who have defaulted the bank loans accountable for that? The mismanagement of economy, for example, the absurdity that we have seen in case of energy sector because this is a political question. When knows I know you know too that this is a political how the parliament has been constituted through the election, wherein the police became an integral part of delivering that victory. Right? Can you hold them accountable? Let me give you one example, and this is again I tend to pick up from the media, given the situation. On July 6th, there was a meeting of the police, high-ranking official police, which was chaired by the DIG, and the senior officers were instructed to expedite the cases against opposition. There is a written minutes to it. It was published in Bangladeshi press as well as in international. And look, what is the meeting says? By any means, and I'm quoting it, literally quoting it. By any means, the government has to win the election. BNP and JI have to be, declared disqualified for the election. This is the police. Can a national parliament, which is elected through the 2018 election, or even for that matter, 2014 election, can they hold anyone accountable from the police? That is the problem. That's a political problem. And that's why I say that if an inclusive election is held, and I don't get it why the government is afraid of it, because if they think that they've done an extremely well job with respect to Rohingya issue, they take credits. People give credit. There are questions, but in general, it is a very positive. Government claims that economy has done well. I tend to disagree with that, but the government claims let it be tested by the people. So the all-party, well, how many parties are we talking about in the National Assembly? We are talking, right? You know, so that's the problem. But generally speaking, yes, it is equal in some measures. We have seen how holding police accountable in the United States has been a problem. Right? The defunding the police movement and Black Lives Matter and everywhere. We have seen the police atrocities and brutality, which I am opposed to, and I have been on the street on many occasions protesting that these are the things that needs to stop. But we cannot expect that this should happen in a parliament, which is de facto one-party parliament. And this parliament was delivered, the victory was delivered by the police, among others.
Great, thanks, Ali. The next couple of questions, one is directed to Meenakshi, and then there's a very similar question from a more personal perspective for Sanjita. And it has to do with the role of human rights defenders in Bangladesh. And it's maybe not surprising that these questions came anonymously. How can people protect themselves and continue working for upholding human rights? The questioner notes it's extremely challenging to continue work under continued surveillance from the government. And then another anonymous question directly for Sanjita. Could you share some of your experiences about the price and the ordeals that your family had gone through since your brother was picked up? So maybe Meenakshi first, and then Sanjita, if you can give your perspective. So thank you both.
Thank you so much. And I think Sanjita's experience is going to be much more telling. But I will only say that it's what I began with when I said defending human rights, not just in Bangladesh. Again, these are challenges that are in many parts of the world right now, that as governments become more authoritarian, there is a tendency almost to clamp down on anyone that can sort of expose some of the shortcomings or the more serious abuses that are taking place. It takes immense courage. It takes often, Yasmin spoke about the work that Amnesty did, which is to look at open source material, you look at videos and so on and try and determine truths. Internet has given us, for its blessings and its sins, opportunities as well, which makes many abuses hard to hide. But I will just, before I pass it to Sanjita for her experience, I will just say on August 10th, it'll be 10 years since Adilur Rahman Khan was picked up and detained. And he has been facing trial. This is one of the most prominent voices on human rights in the world from Bangladesh. And this is a man that has been, facing judicial harassment, has been detained, and is most likely, we fear, going to not get a very fair outcome from this sentencing, just because of what Ali just talked about, because of the sort of the police that is now quite determined to lock up people. And I suppose we should be grateful that they're not being disappeared, which is when I will pass to Sanjita, because that struggle, and I've known her for a long time. I've met her mom, and I know how hard it has been for the family. So yeah, all respect, Sanjita.
Thank you. If you say the experience while they have picked up my brother from 2013 till now, there's I'll say from my family, it's not only one person when they pick and make them disappear, that only he is, suffering that. It's not that. It's all my family members. My elderly mother, she is 75 now, and Shumon Bhai, who is disappeared, he has 2 daughters. They have the younger one is forgetting the father's face now, and we know each night, this 1,000 nights, how we pass, counting the days. We expect that my brother will be staying alive there, but passing each day with that hope that how he is, suffering in that secret detention cells, which came out from different persons who were released after their disappearances and who were abducted and hidden and kept in the secret detention cells. So I know that horrible experiences I heard from them, and we are passing each day with that pathetic experiences. And I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful. I'm counting my days to see my brother back, because we expect that nobody is beyond the law and no one can have a citizen in a country like us, that they can keep them, in those secret detention, just to be in the power. And these people who they have abducted and they are not criminals. They are just opposition activists. That cannot be a reason. And if there is any complaint allegation against them, they can go for trial. So the experience, it is not only my experience, I'm saying, it is experience for all those victim families. I have told you that documented enforced disappearances numbers are 650 and above. But really, in the practice, the real number, which it will be 3 times higher than that, if we go, because there are families who have not raised their cases. There are families who there is nobody from their family to raise, and they're disappeared for many years. And I really expect that we will get justice. We will have proper investigation through the proper justice system. And that's why we want to change this authoritarian government. And we don't want any other family to experience what we are going through. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that testimony, Sanjita. Yasmin, do you have any words for human rights defenders from Amnesty's perspective or your own personal perspective that you want to add to the discussion?
So it's very much like Meenakshi said. It's an ongoing issue in so many countries that we're working on, that where do they draw the line? Where do we draw the line? And every time we work on statements, on research, on campaigns, our mission becomes like how to protect the HRDs on the ground who are giving us the information, because they are at more risk. I think this is an ongoing conversation. I think everybody has a role to play in this, and understand the risks. But I don't have an exact answer to your question, because again, where do we stand? Where does everybody stand when the government is against you? But like Meenakshi said, there are like cases of like very prominent human rights defenders, cases against them, who have such strong voices. And I think well, personally for me, I draw inspiration from all of them. But all I can say is, like, let's keep the conversation going. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Ali, maybe from the perspective of both a journalist and an academic, any advice for academics and journalists in Bangladesh trying to navigate their professional responsibilities and their vocation?
Not only currently in Bangladesh, it's not only happening in Bangladesh, but if you look at other places in Cambodia, for example, that I often refer to, the fundamental point that one has to ask, standing in front of the mirror, that, speaking truth to the power, that's the difficult choice. That's a difficult choice. How do you navigate those kind of things? Most important thing is to be driven by the fact, driven by the data, even by the understanding that what it means. If you're talking of the academics, I see their role as to provide the facts in an unfiltered way, to explain it to the people that this is what it is. without fear. I know it's tall order, because if you're living in a society like, you have to navigate, this is difficult. Yet, it is a responsibility that if you call yourself intellectual, if you call yourself as academic with conscience, you have to do it at some point. That is it not only challenging, it could be perilous, right? It could be. But that is what it is. The journalist, my request, my plea to the journalist in Bangladesh as well as elsewhere, but most importantly, in this instance to Bangladesh, that it is incumbent on them to tell the truth. It is. That's why they have become journalists. It is incumbent on them to tell the truth. Wherever you can, however you can, put it out. Stop being a partisan. Don't reproduce and and circulate misinformation, disinformation, and sometimes outright lies. Remember that lies, misinformation has a very short life action. They're going to die in the sense that people
question for the panelists, and then I'll hand it over to Ambassador Milam to say a few words in wrapping things up. And the question really deals with both the general and the specific. So we had a number of questions specifically about issues like elections or the Digital Security Act or follow-up on enforced disappearances. So there are a number of discrete human rights issues that need to be worked on in Bangladesh. So the question really is the role of the international community. The questioners or the attendees note that there are some governments, some members of the international community that have chosen to be more supportive of the current government, others which perhaps have been more critical. So again, in this balance of inside and outside, we've talked about the role of human rights defenders within the country, but could each of you maybe offer just a brief word on what role you think the international community, both governments, multilateral organizations, and human rights groups, and groups like Right to Freedom, what can we all do to help improve the situation in Bangladesh? So why don't we just maybe go in reverse order from how we started, give Sanjita the first word, then we'll go to Ali, Yasmin, and Meenakshi. We'll wrap it up, then we'll go to Bill. So Sanjita, what would you like to see from the international community?
I think in our current scenario here in Bangladesh, the response we are seeing from the international community is quite strong in few cases, in few areas, and neutral in few areas, and maybe opposite on some areas. But I'd like to point on that like who is strongly raising what is right to the people, what is happening, and what is expected to have the change to the country, and which will be actually good for the general people, and which will show the results, what is expected as a country who is preserving the rights of the general people, who will be ensuring people are not beaten and tortured and having those cases, and people are not getting disappeared for just doing the opposition activity. So I think from the international community, I think as I have already requested, and then we have seen, we expect from all of them just that they should be also stand beside us and raise their voices to have the justice delivery systems effective, and to pursue the restoration of the democracy, which is lacked in here in Bangladesh, and rule of law and human rights in Bangladesh.
Great. Thank you, Sanjita. Ali, from your perspective, what can the international
There are two
community do?
things, John, when we talk about international community and the international organizations such as Human Rights Watch, I make a distinction between them. Insofar as the international community, i.e. the governments are concerned, my question to them, whatever we are discussing today didn't appear overnight. There was a process of the democratic backsliding in Bangladesh. The international community in some ways have contributed to it. They have been either providing corrosive capital or being supposed to step up, act, and take responsibility for their failings that they have done. That includes, I mean, what considerations left them to remain engaged. Engagement is necessary, but does not mean they need to be condoning this kind of thing. In some instances, I see the governments have done it. They need to step up and catch up in their responsibility. That is what I expect them to do. Insofar as the international organizations are concerned, thanks to Amnesty International, thanks to Human Rights Watch, thanks to Asian Human Rights Commission, and also others have stepped up and continued over the years in documenting and the situation. I expect them to continue that and use their leverage, whatever they have, with the respective government and international bodies, including the United Nations, to information, the situation on the ground, and recommending what actions that can be taken to mitigate the situation. This is a responsibility they have been shouldering, thanks to them. But in a sense, the time is running out. And in the coming months, they need to do it far more strongly than they have done it. That's what are my suggestions.
Great, thanks, Ali. Yes, Asmin, any thoughts more on the role of the international community?
Hi. So I saw the time, and I'll try to keep it very brief. I also make a distinction of human rights organizations as well as international community at large, as in governments. For the organizations, I think the main role that I say is monitor, document, continue with call for actions, and mobilize and be an ally, be a supporter of the human rights defenders back home and protection of human rights in general. As for the governments, there are so many mechanisms at their disposal that they can use to raise human rights violations with those who are in power. And I'm not really sure how often this happens, but every time these delegations visit, we normally send a small briefing like, these are the human rights violations if you wanna raise them. The simplest answer is we use them, just talk about them, and try to make governments accountable. Use what is at your disposal. There's so much of agreements, bilateral meetings that happen that can be beneficial for the protection of human rights. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Meenakshi will give you the last word on this.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. I mean, my colleagues have all spoken so eloquently, but here is what I want to say, which I'll take the old lady privilege to say. When we were growing up, our parents used to always say, your friends, who your friends are is who you become, and so on and so forth. So here is what I think we want to say to the friends of Bangladesh, to governments who have strategic, economic, and other interests, which makes Bangladesh an attractive partner for them. I would say here, all problems in all governments that we've alluded to, here is what Bangladesh government has done to families like Sanjita's. When someone has disappeared, senior ministers, senior police officers have turned around and said to them, oh, your brother has fled because of bad debts. Your husband is having an affair. That is the government that we want to be friends with. And I would urge all people that want to partner with Bangladesh to remember that, in all the countries that we work, in all the human rights challenges that we face, it is very seldom that a government is this cruel to a family that is searching for their loved one. They might, and therefore, if they can say this, we have to be very careful about what kind of friends they're choosing.
Thank you very much, Meenakshi. So I will now take the opportunity to apologize to those attendees whose questions I wasn't able to get to. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for the questions, and we will certainly take those on board at Right to Freedom. Also, thank you to all of you who attended, and thank you to our presenters. I think we learned a lot, not just the substance in today's discussion, which was outstanding, but also from a Right to Freedom perspective, we learned about the logistics of a virtual event. And we'll huddle together afterwards and see how we can maybe do some more of this going forward, given the interest, given the engagement of everyone. So with that, I will turn it over to our president, Ambassador Milam, who will give us his parting words and send us on our way. So Bill, over to you.
Well, thank you, John. My parting words are that I'm sorry we're parting so soon. I mean, it seems like just a few minutes ago that we started. It's been an extremely interesting discussion, one of the best I've been a part of. I haven't been much of a part of this one, except as a listener. But let me tell you something. Maybe this is the final word. You might have thought that I was sitting here and it was just my duty to sit here and listen to you and listen to the discussion. I might have thought that too when it started, but to tell you the truth, it's been a real privilege to be here and listen to the discussion, because it has been a fascinating discussion, very insightful. Has given me many insights, many questions, which it's too late to ask now. But maybe I hope we can do this again sometime, and get our speakers back, because I'd love to have a little more time with them. But to the speakers and to everybody who's out there, thank you very much for attending. It's been a real pleasure for me to be here, and I hope it's been a pleasure for you too.
Great, thank you, Bill. So as noted at the beginning, we've recorded today's session. We will post the video link online. For those of you who have been in touch with Right to Freedom before, look for future communications. For those who want to learn more about our work, you can visit us on the web, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. And our Executive Director, Mushfiq Fazal Ansari, and Program Assistant, Abdur Rahim, are always available to consult with you. We welcome your partnership, and we share the same goal of a better future for the people of Bangladesh and the broader region. So with that, we will conclude today's session, and I wish you all the best going forward. So thank you very much. Okay, so we've stopped recording. Again, thank you to all the panelists. That was outstanding. Thank you, and thank you, Mushfiq and Bill. So I will leave here, and again, Mushfiq, I don't know if you have to end the chat, but thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. And any follow-up questions, please feel free to get in touch with Mushfiq or any of us. And if you have suggestions on how we could do this differently or better in the future, we're all ears.
Thank you, John. You can end the session.
Okay,
Thanks,
great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.